Hi everyone, how are you doing today? So I was tagged by Heather at Heather Reads to do the trick or treat tag. This is a tag she created for the Halloween season, and the idea is that you come up with five books that were tricks, like they didn't quite meet your expectations in some way, or they just were not a good experience in the end. And then five books that were treats, like really great reading experiences. Costumes not required for this. I usually do dress up for Halloween, but I haven't, I don't have a costume this year. I do have this Zorro filter on Zoom, and I have this very comfortable blanket. So that's gonna be my cape, because I'm also sick and I need to stay warm. And if you were expecting Tyrone Power, I am sorry. We're more doing the thrift store version of that today. I'm going to start with a trick and then I'll do a treat and then go back and forth. So the first trick book, and I don't have a copy of it here, so I'll show it on screen. The Atlas of Beauty, Women of the World in 500 Portraits. So this book was making the rounds some years ago. I read it in 2018 and um, it's supposed to be a book representing women of the world in 500 portraits. Um, and it started out pretty strong. It had a lot of vivid photography of women of many ages, ethnicities, and locations, with little stories and quotes from the women being photographed and interviewed. But after a while, I realized that was not like a complete representation here. I was expecting women from at least, I don't know, 100, 150 countries. I think there's like 190 plus countries total, depending how you measure. But actually, the book ends up repeating some countries and maybe even some models as it goes on. And some glaring omissions in the book were evident. I didn't see any photos of women from Vietnam or Canada or Japan or just some very obvious, uh, you know, countries you'd expect to be in this book. So again, it wasn't horrible, but I felt tricked. I felt like I was missing out on something. Yeah, that was the Atlas of Beauty. Not at all what it seemed to say on the tin. So, that was a trick. A treat that I will feature. Which one should we start with? Let's start with the one on top of the stack. Okay, this is The Lost Writings, oh boy, of Franz Kafka. Wow, that is freaky. Um, The Lost Writings of Franz Kafka. This was a little book that came out, when did it come out? 2020, so it's pretty new. And it just is a compilation of some of the undiscovered, recently translated fragments of Kafka. For Kafka, he wanted all of his writing to be burned when he died, and what's happened since his death? People are constantly trying to find new things that he wrote to publish. Um, such as life. But yeah, I do love these lost writings. I've read some of his other uh, anthologies, I guess, of like little bits of fiction or nonfiction that he wrote. The Blue Octavo Notebooks, coming to mind most prominently. And those are good, but I think this is just going to appeal to people that really enjoy his short stories and want more of that. So, yeah, if you like Kafka, if you don't like Kafka, I do recommend The Lost Writings. All right, so another trick. And in this video, I'm trying to talk about books I haven't talked about before, so there's going to be some really random stuff here. The next trick I want to talk about is anything by G.A. Henty. Now, for some context here, back in the day, Henty was a very popular author among homeschoolers, and um, I don't know how that started. I think the idea was that Henty was a historical fiction author, and because he lived in the 1800s, his books didn't have any objectionable content in them. And so the idea was, well, if you get your kids to read Henty, they're going to learn history and it's going to be all fine and groovy. But um I read four books by Henty set in different time periods, and I just remember them being incredibly dull. And he gets very in the weeds with his historical facts and research, and just not very interesting, honestly. If you want to read good boys' own historical fiction, that's the other thing. These books generally featured boy characters. I don't remember if there were any girl characters. But if you want to read good boys' own literature, Robert Louis Stevenson is more famous for a reason. His books are amazing. I still think about the friendships in Stevenson's books, the friendship between David and Alan in Kidnapped, and the complicated relationship that Jim has with Long John Silver and Dr. Livesey in Treasure Island. All these really nuanced and interesting human portrayals. Um, The Black Arrow is a really good book by Robert Louis Stevenson, not as widely read. Anyway, big fan of Robert Louis Stevenson, but Henty just isn't it. And I wasn't old enough to read him critically at the time. I think I was like, I don't know, 11, 12, whatever. But I guess has some questionable slash problematic views as well. So I don't know. I think a lot of people back then did. But you know, that's just something that comes with the territory of these old books. Nonetheless, I didn't see a lot of redeeming qualities in G.A. Henty. All right, treat number two. I have next on my stack Chess Story by Stefan Zweig. Um, I love Chess Story. This is a novella. Whoa. This is a novella I read some years ago about a man who is imprisoned by the Nazis and yet uses chess as a survival skill. I can talk. Um, and Zweig had a very tragic life and a very, very sad personal story. But and there's some of that in here, but I do feel like this is a story of human triumph over evil and human resilience. So, it's kind of a dark story, but it's also inspiring. Um, and it's also got quite a lot of charm and humor in it as well. It's not just like, oh, depressing, depressing. I think it's quite charming. So I love Chess Story. I'm already ready to read it again. Um, Definitely a treat, especially if you're reading it for the first time. So, trick number three. I'm gonna go with Go Set a Watchman by Harper Lee. I read this not too long after it came out. I think I read it in 2016. And, it was very controversial at the time, due to the way that I would say, sort of inverted or changed the story of To Kill a Mockingbird. And there was a lot of controversy about whether Harper Lee had sanctioned its writing or publishing, I should say. There was a lot of drama about whether she'd even written it because it was so different than To Kill a Mockingbird. Now, I think in the sum of things, I'm inclined to think that she did write it. I don't know if she sanctioned its publication or not, but I remember reading this book and just breaking down in tears after I finished it because I found it very disturbing the way it changed the characters so much. But, I do think it's an interesting variant on To Kill a Mockingbird. I don't know that it should have been published. I don't think it needed to be published. It feels more like a first draft or just an alternate universe or history of the characters. Either way, not a big fan of Go Set a Watchman. Felt a bit tricked after reading it. But looking at it now, I think it shows the writing process. So in that ways, it's good, I guess. Um, Sorry, that was a very loud motorcycle. Anyways, Go Set a Watchman. Do you like it? Have you read it? Be curious to hear other people's thoughts. The next treat I have on my stack, which I have talked about recently, is Lois the Witch by Elizabeth Gaskell. I did finish this book, and I was surprised and delighted by it. I didn't know that Gaskell had written a story about the Salem witch trials, and I was really intrigued to read her perspective and not disappointed. I think this story has aged reasonably well. Um, do I like everything about it? No. I don't particularly like the ending, but I think if you're looking for something set in that time period with an interesting angle that is a British perspective, um, I think this book's worth a read. It's worth a perusal. I certainly took quite a few notes from it, which surprises me. I mean, I've read longer books that I've taken fewer notes in. So, yeah, I liked it. It gave me a renewed interest in Elizabeth Gaskell, whom I've not read a lot of or by. Um, and yeah, you can get it in these little Penguin editions right now, or just find it on Project Gutenberg. I'm sure it's on there. All right, so trick number four, I guess. Piranesi by Susanna Clark. My husband and I read this last summer when we were still dating, and we were reading it to each other, so that was a treat. But the book itself, it starts out one way, and then about halfway or so, it changes tone and setting quite dramatically. And I liked the beginning well enough. I thought it was a nice bit of escapism. I enjoyed the setting that she was building and just generally found it to be a very cozy kind of read. And I enjoyed the mystery and everything that was in it. But when it makes that shift in the second half, it really lost me. And some of the writing seemed to me very cheesy. We did a whole review of it. I can link to it, or if you search the channel, you can find it. Um, but yeah, I felt a bit tricked by Susanna Clark by the time I made it through the book. But your mileage may vary. Most people loved it, and I think for those who read it during the pandemic, it probably hit harder because of the themes and, just the overall ambience of it. Okay, so the next treat I want to talk about is William Shakespeare's sonnets. Now, I am not a big Shakespeare fan. I adore Hamlet, but I just have not been able to get into most of his other plays that I've tried. But I do love the sonnets. This is a beautiful copy that my mother-in-law gave us for our wedding, and it just, I think the sonnets are just so immediate and human, and the language is very difficult, I will say. But I just remember reading this like a year or two ago and just being so deeply moved by some of these sonnets and um, the beautiful language that he uses and the things he's alluding to in some of them really kind of left a deep impression on me, especially when he talks about time and death and some of these more somber topics, not just like the love stuff, but the things that are more about mortality and life and stuff. So I like the sonnets. I think it's a treat and want to reread them fully. All right. So trick number five. I guess this is the last trick, isn't it? So, oh boy. So when I was 12, I had a friend who was a reader but had pretty different tastes than me, and she recommended a book called Dragonwyck by Anya Seton. Now, Anya Seton was a romance author, and Dragonwyck was published in 1944. So, not super contemporary or anything, but, romance writer of the 20th century. And my friend assured me that Dragonwyck was just like Jane Eyre. And I remember telling my mom about it and how I was going to read it. And my mom was pretty skeptical because I think she looked up Seaton and found out that she was a romance author. And she's like, "Are you sure you want to read this?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's supposed to be just like Jane Eyre." And so my mom's like, "Okay." And I just love that my mom like let me make my choices in this scenario. Um, because it was certainly a learning experience. I read Dragonwyck and there was quite a bit of problematic content in it, especially for a 12-year-old or however old I was. Um, the main character, I shouldn't say the main character, the male protagonist, the love interest is highly abusive and all kinds of scary, and it's supposed to be romantic, right? And I remember afterwards, well, being mildly traumatized by some of the content in the book. I remember trying to tell my friend my experience, and she's like, "Well, I mean, besides all that, he was perfect, right?" And I was like, sure, sure, we'll go with that." I know Mr. Rochester is not the best guy, but he's kind of a saint compared to Nicholas What's his face in Dragonwyck. Um, anyway, that was a trick. My friend didn't mean to trick me, but I did feel like I was not reading Jane Eyre. Let's just put it that way. All right, so the last treat that I will talk about, I don't have a copy of it, so I'll put it on the screen. We have Sylvie and Bruno by Lewis Carroll. Sylvie and Bruno is a unique reading experience. I think it's going to be a love it or hate it. It's a story about these two siblings, Sylvie and Bruno, that are fairies and they live in fairyland with their father, who I think is the king. And there's like this whole political drama going on in fairyland. But then there's also the real world and this rather sad, sentimental love triangle going on in the real world among adults, not fairies, not fairy children. And so you've got this very personal human drama going on in the real world, and then you've got political drama in fairyland, and somehow the two worlds intersect and collide throughout this book. Um, and you've got Lewis Carroll's religious and social commentary also woven into this book. So it's absolutely crazy. It is very whimsical, but in a completely different way than Alice in Wonderland. And it's not nearly, I mean, Alice in Wonderland seems pretty linear and straightforward and conventional compared to Sylvie and Bruno. But I just know that I'll never have another reading experience like Sylvie and Bruno again. I mean, even rereading it, it won't be quite the same. I was truly captivated by it, and I thought it was very charming. And there's some scenes in it that I will just remember as long as I live. Just favorite scenes. So, yeah, that's my fifth treat. And again, one of those books that's love it or hate it. Would definitely recommend it though if you are a fan of whimsy and Victorian fairy tales. All right, so that's my trick or treat tag. Um, Sorry for this lame costume, but we're just rolling with it. I'm actually really loving the California sunshine in the background. I think that's California. Um, Anyways, I don't know who I will tag for this. If you're watching it and you want to do it, feel free to go for it. I might tag someone in the comments. Either way, hope you guys have a great weekend, week ahead, whichever it is, and I'll see you next time. Bye.